All right, welcome to our coffee hour special speaker discussion. We're so pleased to have Jim Haslip with us today, who's a practitioner of the Baha'i Faith, and he's brought along a couple others as well, Eileen and Ben, to join the discussion, who are also practitioners of the faith. And we're just so delighted and excited to learn more about your journey and about your faith tradition. And we just thank you so much for taking the time.
Well, thanks for having us. It's always wonderful to be included in these kinds of explorations and to be around people that are trying to learn more about different religions. It's a wonderful thing. So I appreciate the opportunity. So I just jump right in and start talking about the Baha'i Faith.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay. Well, I'm going to answer a couple of questions that people often ask me first, and then I'll start talking about the Baha'i Faith. The Baha'i Faith is the second widest spread religion in the world after Christianity. So people often think of various religions as being located in certain places, but we're spread out all over. To give you an idea, we are in over 190 countries are well established and 45 territories. The Baha'i Faith has been translated into 803 languages. You have to get your mind around that. We include more than 2,000 different indigenous tribes and ethnic groups. So when you go into a Baha'i meeting, everybody won't look like me. There's incredible diversity. And when people become Baha'is from these various traditions, they bring their traditions with them. So you'll see various music and foods and dances and various activities that are incorporated and appreciated and celebrated among the Baha'is. So that's a little bit of background. So what is the Baha'i Faith? The Baha'i Faith believes in many of the things that you do, and I don't think you'll find things that are contrary to what you believe. We believe in one God. And basically that the major teachers or messengers of God are all of the same station, and that all of mankind is also one. Now having said that, that sounds simple enough. The three onenesses: oneness of God, oneness of religion, and oneness of humanity. So I could ask you that, what does the Baha'i Faith stand for? You could probably repeat it back to me, but what does it really mean? That means when I've been invited into a sweat lodge by the Lakota Sioux, and we're all praying and chanting, we're praying to the same God in my mind. When I visited the Hopi Indian reservation, and we're all praying for rain, and they were doing the rainbow dance, I believe we're all praying to the same God. And when I visit a mosque, when I visit a synagogue, when I visit a church, I believe we're all praying to the same God. Now in the Jewish tradition, it's clear God is described as an unknowable essence, and one does not even give a name to God. So that kind of idea of God being something where you can't incorporate in your own mind, and therefore put a label on it, means that God is transcendent and beyond a label, even though it's hard for us as humans to adjust to that idea. But when I say one religion, I'll say when I look at the principles of the Baha'i Faith and look at the principles of Christianity, just as you have looked at Buddhism and other religions already, you'll start to notice a lot of similarities. So we believe in the spiritual teachings are the same in all religions because they came from the same place. There's only one God teaching through various messengers and special teachers, and therefore the spiritual essence of each religion would be the same. But what we look at and what we pay attention to very often are the social teachings, which come and are important for various points of time and conditions, such as in the time of Moses, the tradition eventually became such they didn't eat pork. And if you think about that, it makes a lot of sense because of the conditions they were in, right? And when Muhammad came, they also did not permit the eating of pork. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with pork, But there's something very much wrong with eating it if the conditions are not right, because you can get sick. So it is with social teachings. We believe that social teachings are adapted and adjusted to the conditions of the time, but the spiritual teachings, you'll notice, are essentially the same. So I'll come back to that in a bit. When we say that humanity is one, that is very difficult in the world we live in, that is so used to categorizing people into us groups and we groups. And so we don't do that. So we don't exclude anybody, and we don't take sides with groups. So while we may be discussing issues of immigration, of taxation, of child education, we're sticking with the issues. We're not taking one side or the other. We're trying to look at if we look at the politics as a boxing ring with the Republicans and Democrats in the ring, what the Baha'is would be doing, we'll be getting into the ring and say, okay, let's stop fighting. Let's all go take a shower. We're going to go have tea in a little while and talk to each other and start to appreciate each other's point of view. And then we'll come up with a point of view that incorporates the most important aspects of both points of view. You see, so that's disconcerting. So a lot of people have trouble understanding where do the Baha'is fit in this whole thing? Well, we feel our cause is the cause of God, which is a cause of unity. One of the central figures of the Baha'i Faith referred to it as love, love, unity, unity, fellowship, fellowship. And they said, is he talking about 6 different things there? Well, there's unity within the Baha'i Faith, of course, but there's unity with all other people. And fellowship within the Baha'i Faith, of course, but there's also fellowship with all people. And the love, of course, is universal. You have to love, you love God, you love yourself, but you love your family, and you start to extend out the love. So we believe that all religions are essentially trying to do the same thing, but that they are progressive. That Moses, for example, is dealing with 12 tribes. He's got to bring them together into one group. That's not an easy thing to do. So he's bringing about unity in 12 tribes. Well, by the time Jesus comes along, he changes the game. He says, you heard it said, love thy neighbor, but I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. So he's changed the game. So all of a sudden, those who are not Jews are part of the game. He's saying, and he sends people out to teach among the Gentiles. So he's changed the game. When Muhammad came, the favorite sport among the Arab tribes was raiding each other, killing each other off, and stealing each other's property. That was the culture. How do you bring that group together under one tent? Which is what he did. He unified all the Arab tribes, and of course, the history is something is a whole different thing. But that's one of the things he was trying to do. So what is the Baha'i Faith doing? Baha'i Faith is inviting everybody into the tent. Well, that's uncomfortable. If you really think about it, you're used to people being outside your tent, and now we're saying everybody's in. You mean you're welcoming in the Jews and the Muslims and the Christians and the blacks and the whites and the Republicans and the Protestants all in the same tent? How can that possibly work? Well, it can't, based on logic and tradition, but it can, just as Muhammad and Jesus and Moses all demonstrated. It can, if the unifying forces comes from God through a special spiritual teacher. And so that's what we believe. And consequently, that's why I started with statistics first. The Baha'i Faith is so widespread because everybody is welcome. So all of you are welcome to join the Baha'i Faith. We'll show you how to do it after the meeting. but what you'll do is you bring your Christian traditions and beliefs and stories with you. For example, if I said, you remember the story of Joseph being put in the well by his brothers, and then later he winds up becoming a prominent person? Well, I can tell you in the Baha'i history, the founder of the Baha'i Faith, Baha'u'llah, when he's teaching a religion that is not compatible with the Muslim leadership, they put him in a well and chain him to the wall and leave him there to die. Well, make a long story short, of course, he winds up being exiled and so on. But that story is very, very important. if you look at the story of the Good Samaritan, I believe that's a good preview of what the Baha'i Faith is all about. And that is somebody who you don't even know, is not in your family, that belongs to a different group, and they're in trouble, you help them. That's what the Baha'i Faith is. And that's what I know that Rob in your church is doing, and your sister Amy's church is trying to do. So what we're talking about is not an unusual idea, but it's what the Baha'i Faith is all about. It's really reaching out. As I said, that's why I started with statistics. Over 1,000 different ethnic groups, over 100 languages, and so on, just to give you an idea of how inclusive it is. So some of the things that are important for bringing the family together are the importance of independently searching for truth. The tendency is to take on the views of your group and stop looking for truth yourself. Does that sound like local politics to you? It happens, but it happens in all kinds of things. It happens in religion, it helps in culture groups. We take on what we're told to believe, and then we believe it. Well, the Baha'i Faith says you have to search for truth independently. Well, that's inconvenient. That could put you on an island all by yourself. You may be the only one doing that. But so consequently, we have a fondness for science, investigation, research, logic, and a value of different traditions, and that there's truth in different traditions if you look at the area of principles. So besides saying that truth is found in both science and religion, we also have to have some work to do. The Baha'i Faith isn't just something you join and then you happen to go attend the services and then that you're done with that. No, you have work to do. Eliminating all forms of prejudices is our work, one of our works. Well, who wants to take that on? I mean, that's a pretty big job. However, as an individual, you look at your circumstances and you do your best you can with the circumstance you find yourself in. So you may be working on eliminating racial prejudice if you live in the United States. Or you may be focusing on the education of girls if you live in a Muslim country. You may be fostering the equality of women and men if you are involved with people who are active in the Me Too movement. So consequently, you're working to eliminate prejudice and recognizing that it's impossible to be born into a culture without adopting the prejudices of that culture. So it's an endless spiritual journey for the individual to clean themselves up, as opposed to simply looking out there and saying, oh, you're the one who's prejudiced. No, I'm the one who's prejudiced, and I've got to work on me. So it's a part of the spiritual journey. Also, another important factor in terms of looking at the world is eliminating the extremes of wealth and poverty. So that's a discussion all by itself. But when people are wallowed in poverty and they have to put all their energy into just surviving, that's not an acceptable situation to be in for one's spiritual journey. And if one is so much surrounded by wealth that they have to spend all their time managing that wealth, that's not a good situation either. So eliminating these extremes is something that is to be done in terms of the long journey. So the Baha'is are involved in the process of bringing the broader family together. That would be our job. The central figures of the Baha'i Faith, this new tradition started to be taught in 1844 by a man who came to be known as the Bab, translated in English, the Gate. And he made it clear that he had a position or a job, let's say, similar to John the Baptist, of preparing the way for one who is going to come in just a very short time to teach an even broader message. And so that broader message was taught by Baha'u'llah. And those of us who are followers of Baha'u'llah, a Baha'i is a follower of Baha or a follower of Baha'u'llah. So Baha'u'llah began to actively teach in 1863, which led to his being exiled out of the, first of all, he was sent out of the Shiite area of Iran, sent to Baghdad, which is more Sunni. He was there for quite a while, and then he got invited to go to Constantinople. They were afraid to exile him because he was so popular that they didn't want to cause a big stir. So they invited him to Constantinople. Once he got there, they sent him to Adrianople. If you look on the map, it's at Durnate. That now it was the most western point of the Ottoman Empire, which is now in very much would be western Turkey. So he still had influence and great popularity there. So then they sent him to prison city. There used to be a fort during the Crusader times, but it had been deteriorated and made into a prison city. So in the literature, it's referred to as Acre or Akka, and now it's called Akka. It's on the north shore in Israel, across the bay from Haifa, where the picture that Eileen has is actually from, if you're in a boat in the bay of Haifa looking into Haifa, you'd see what Eileen has behind her. Now where Akka is would be across the bay, where Eileen is looking. There's a bay right across that bay would be where Akka is. That's where Baha'u'llah was confined, and you'd think that a prisoner couldn't have too much influence. But the faith has spread all, as you can see from what I said before. The faith has spread all over the world. Now, one of the important things about the Baha'i Faith that's different than other religions, such as Islam, it wasn't clear who the authority was when Muhammad passed, and two sects came up immediately: the Sunnis and the Shiites, and that has continued on. But in the Baha'i Faith, we have what we refer to as a covenant. Baha'u'llah, in writing, assigns authority to only one person to interpret the Baha'i Faith, and that was his eldest son, Abdul Baha. He, in turn, assigns the authority to interpret the Baha'i Faith to only one person when he passes away. That was his grandson, Shoghi Effendi. Now, in his writings, Baha'u'llah says eventually the head of the faith will be the Universal House of Justice that will have the authority for the entire Baha'i world. And that requires an election from Baha'is from all over the world. And so that doesn't take place until 1963. So that's basically the broad outlines of the covenant. Then within every community where Eileen and Ben live, for example, wherever there is 9 or more Baha'is living, an elected group of people form what's called a spiritual assembly, because we have no clergy. So all the things that Robin does, the committee, you might say, of the local spiritual assembly does all those things, organizes meetings and weddings and funerals and solving conflicts and setting up children's classes and so on. So at the national level, there's a national spiritual assembly. So that's basically our organization. What we have in common with all of you is we're all on the same spiritual journey to know ourselves and to know God and to know each other. So it goes back to the 3 onennesses. So I'll stop there and then invite your questions. Otherwise, I'll go on for another.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jim. So while others are thinking of their questions, and you can ask your question, or you can also type your question into the chat. But I'm wondering, is there a particular, I know you said that the Baha'i Faith is all over the world. Is there a country or countries in which the Baha'i Faith is the largest religion?
No, as far as I can tell, it started in Iran. So naturally, Baha'i is the largest religious minority in Iran. And then the Baha'i Faith is spread fast some places. For example, in the United States, in the state of South Carolina, for example, oddly enough, the largest religious minority after Christianity is the Baha'i Faith. But by and large, the Baha'is are spread out all over the world in smaller groups, and then it is taken off and spread rapidly in different places at different times. For example, when I became a Baha'i 50 years ago, the Baha'i Faith was spreading very, very rapidly in Africa. And one of the largest Baha'i groups was in Uganda. A few years later, it was spreading very, very rapidly in India. And there are large numbers of Baha'is all over. So basically, anywhere in the world you go, even St. Helena, you'll find Baha'is. You go to Ukiah, or wherever you go, there's going to be Baha'is there. Our numbers are something that's a little hard to say, because the Baha'i Faith is outlawed in virtually every Muslim country. It was also outlawed in virtually every communist country also, but there's still large numbers there. And so my son, who worked in the World Center for a number of years, I asked him, well, what is the real number of Baha'is around the world? Just give me a frame of reference. And the number of Baha'is is about the same number as there are Jews in the world, or about the same number as there are Mormons or Seventh-day Adventists. All those numbers are all pretty close in the same range. So we're somewhere in that range, except that whereas those groups tend to have gathered in certain places and they're known for being in certain places, we're all over the world. So you can't identify us with any particular place, particularly as a Baha'i place.
That's really interesting. It seems like that might be an advantage under persecution as well. Like when Christianity was a minority religion and persecuted in its early days, it spread sort of, by stealth and by communities kind of adopting it. It's that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
What other questions are there?
Just raise your hand and Robin will call on you.
Don, go ahead.
So I joined a little bit late, so I may have missed this, but do you have regular gatherings like we would have a church service, or
yes?
How do you get together as a community?
Well, I'm the only Baha'i where I am, so I look in the mirror and I have a meeting. So it kind of depends. Where Eileen and Ben are in Napa, there are regular meetings. Because there are no clergy, there's a local spiritual assembly, but the spiritual assembly doesn't operate independently. They operate with the community in something we call the feast, which all the Baha'is of every age, from babes in arms to people even older than me, all come together and participate in discussing the affairs of the faith. So you may have an idea for something to be done that comes from a 3-year-old or a 103-year-old. And the spiritual assembly will then be responsible for taking it up, discussing it, and doing the organizing part of it. So every 19 days, the Baha'i calendar is 19 days of 19 months. And we get together for administrative purposes that way. Otherwise, we have holy days. There's a holy day you're all welcome to attend, just to kind of get a flavor for what it's like. Ben and Eileen can connect you to it. It's called Nowruz. You may have heard of the term before. It's a new year. So that's coming up in about 3 weeks toward the end of March. And then we get together all the time, because we love each other. So whenever we get a chance, we try to get together.
Jim, can I add something here?
Yeah, Eileen.
We also have, and this is all over the world, what we call as devotional gatherings, which are open to all people, Baha'is, and anyone who's welcome, to share prayers and inspirational readings, to get closer to God and to get closer to each other. And those are, we have them in Napa as well. So those would be available to anybody to attend.
Thank you. And just to add to what Eileen is saying, our purpose is to eventually have these devotional gatherings every day, every morning, so that the people of a community, no matter what their faith or background, can join. However, our numbers are too small to pull that off, but that's what we're working towards.
So there isn't a set day of the week then where you would traditionally have a service. It's just kind of as regularly as possible.
Every 19 days would be the regular.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the Baha'i Feast, it looks a lot like the Last Supper. Visualize the Last Supper, and you have Jesus. Of course, we don't have Baha'u'llah at our meetings, but instead we'll have the writings. Okay, so we'll use scripture as part of our meetings, prayers, But then we will have a meeting, a business meeting. So our business is conducted there, just like especially after the ascension of Jesus, which in your church we were talking about before too long. The apostles, after the ascension of Jesus, have to decide what to do now. So this is the kind of thing that the Baha'is are doing. Okay, we're all getting together here. What are we going to do now? So that's the feast. And then the other thing is to have some kind of refreshments. So just like the Last Supper was a supper, we will have we'll share something to eat and something to drink. Yeah. Other questions? I see Teg.
Jim, hi.
Hi.
Is there a set location here in Napa where you regularly meet, or do you meet in each other's homes?
Yeah, we meet in each other's homes. Places where the Baha'i numbers are grown, sometimes there'll be a center purchased. For example, in San Francisco, for many, many years, there was a center there, and the Baha'is would tend to meet at that center. But cities are so spread out, we tend to meet in people's homes anyway, because it's just more convenient that way. If you've ever been to Chicago and gone north of Evanston, you may have seen the Baha'i Temple. But obviously the Baha'is of all the United States all can't meet in that temple. And we're building these houses of worship all over the world, but we're still going to be necessary to meet in people's homes. As Eileen said, having devotional gatherings in every morning will probably take place in neighborhoods. Yeah, is what I envision. Right now, they happen in communities maybe once a week or every few days, depending on that community. Sometimes there'll be one every day in different places you can go to, but it's evolving depending on the size of the Baha'is. As I say, when I look at my community, I look in the mirror and there I am. So let me tell you a little bit about our prayer life. The Baha'is pray formally, well, it's kind of informally, 3 times a day. We're encouraged to pray in the morning before we get started. We're encouraged to pray at the end of the day, take into account of what happened in that day. So the two are connected. In the morning, we kind of are encouraged to make our spiritual plans. In the evening, to take stock of how we've done. And then during the day, we have a choice of one of 3 different obligatory prayers. So there'll be a particular prayer that we'll choose to say. But we're also encouraged to say another prayer, a very short prayer, 95 times during the course of the day. So some people have like rosary beads and say it one right after the other, but basically having an attitude of prayerfulness and turning to God is a habit one is trying to develop. Right? Now we also have a fast coming up. So in a few days, there's 1 month of 19 days in which if you are between certain ages, I think it's 21 to 65, I'm too old for this now, and there's a fast. And the fast is during just the daylight hours. So you can eat and drink the rest of the day, but during the daylight hours, you abstain from food and drink, unless you have a medical condition or you're older or you're nursing a baby or something like that, then you don't fast. But for people who are healthy enough during those age groups, they fast once a year. And the purpose of fasting isn't just to abstain from food. It's like going to a monastery. The attitude should be like going to a monastery and spending 19 days in prayer and reflection would be the right attitude to take into a fast. And the purpose of the fast is to remind you to have a special month to really dedicate yourself to prayer and meditation. So that's what the fast is there for, that purpose. You remember Jesus went off to fast 40 days and this kind of thing. So that's part of your tradition also. But that's something that we do regularly. It's coming up in a few days.
So your fast is much like Ramadan.
Yeah.
It is. Theirs is 30 days and ours is 19. Mm-hmm.
Now on your 19-day, 19 months, so your feast vary by the season, or is there a correction factor?
Oh, our fast is set according to the solar calendar. So it's always March 2nd to March 21st every year. Because it's springtime all over the world. In the north and southern hemispheres, it's a mild condition. So it's not a time in which you're dealing with extreme temperatures and difficulties. It's the easiest time of the year to fast. So it's set by the calendar. So the Ramadan is set by the lunar calendar, so it moves.
Yes.
Ours is set by the solar calendar, so it doesn't move.
Jim, when you are not fasting, do you have any dietary or alcohol restrictions?
We eat as much as we can, as often as we can. But other than moderation, yeah, no, we don't drink alcohol and we don't take recreational drugs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that may be very disappointing. We may see a bunch of people leave the meeting now. Yeah. So that's an adjustment. I mean, if you're my age, then I look out at everybody who's here. If you're used to it, anytime you bring somebody over, you offer them a drink. Adjusting to that, if you become a Baha'i, like I did when I was 28, that was a big change for me. I didn't know how to be a host to people without offering them a drink, and so there's some adjustments. That's the only one that I can rethink of that was took me a few weeks to adjust to. Other questions?
I'm really interested in the prayer that you try to say 95 times a day. Would you be willing to share that prayer with us?
Yeah, it's very simple. It's Allah Apa. That's it. Now, the meaning and intent and purpose behind it is very varied because in a sense you're calling on the name of God. What does that mean to you? Now, you may be calling on God for assistance. You may be calling on God to acknowledge your love of God. You may be calling on God for lots of different reasons. So that's the prayer. And so what it does, the purpose is to constantly connect you with God. That's why it's so simple. Allah, translated English, is God. You know, some people think, well, the Muslims believe in a different God because they call it Allah. No, that's Arabic. It means God, same God that you have. And Allah Apa is God the most glorious. Yeah, so in your tradition, you knew that eventually Jesus would return in the glory of God. We believe that return is Baha'u'llah. So that was a bit challenging to me coming out of a Christian tradition to say that you said Jesus has returned. You've got to be kidding me. So how do you go about figuring out if that's true or not? So I leave that question with you. If you're curious, then I leave that question with yourself. For me, I figured that the guy had to be a charlatan, had to be a con man. So I read everything he wrote. And then all of a sudden it struck me that I'm believing all of this. I'm a believer, I'm a follower of this. And so it happened spontaneously for me. Other people hear about the teachings and something in about them makes them become a Baha'i just like that. Others sometimes study for years. Some hang around the Baha'is for their whole lifetime and never become a Baha'i and say, yeah, I believe all of that, but they don't become a Baha'i. So that's a mysterious thing, this recognizing Baha'u'llah as a divine messenger.
Jim, do you have, maybe to put this in secular terms, dual citizenship? Do you have practitioners that practice not only, Baha'i faith, but also are members of another spiritual group, such as, whether they're Jewish or Islamic or Christians?
Is when people our ages become Baha'is, very often there's a transition period for those people. I remember when I became a Baha'i, there were my Jewish friends were still doing Jewish activities. Some of my Christian friends are still doing Christian activities. But by and large, at some point, you want everybody to know your identity as a Baha'i, and so you start to concentrate on that. But I've gone to, my wife belongs to Robin's sister's church, Amy's church, and I've gone to church with her over well over 100 times. And I've done activities for the church. I did the Stephen ministry with for them. And I've done, just in the last few months, I've done, I think, 3 or 4 different workshops for their community on subjects such as grace, spiritual listening, because we're basically on the same spiritual journey. When you look at spiritual things, we're talking about the same things. So yeah, so we tend to associate, as I said, I've been to sweat lodges, and I studied with a rabbi for a while. So we consider ourselves, we consider your religion our religion. We've just brought your religion forward. So we haven't left it behind. We're not cutting you off. We're bringing you with us. Would be the way I'd look at it. Yeah. So I like to visit and even take part in activities of different people of different religious backgrounds. I feel I'm part of them, even if they don't feel I'm part of them. I feel I'm part of them. Yeah, other question. Somebody got a hand up. Sue, turn your.
Sue.
Can't hear. You're muted.
Okay, here I am.
Oh, there you are.
What about marriage? Do you have marriages within the Baha'i Faith, and who performs them if you do?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, since I became a Baha'i 50 years ago, the state recognizing the legality of Baha'i marriages was something that was in process. And gradually, within the first few years I was a Baha'i, the Baha'i Faith was recognized as being able to have its own marriages. That is not universally the case all over the world. In Iran, for example, they still do not recognize Baha'i marriages in some cases. So how does it go about it? Baha'is marry themselves before 2 witnesses. So when Alexander and I got married, we needed to have 2 witnesses. We actually had more witnesses than that. And because she's an Episcopalian, like most of you are, we for her comfort and feeling that we were married, Father Mac, some of you know Father Mac, also performed a marriage ceremony. So we did both because we're putting the 2 faiths together. So that's fine. So typically, if 2 Baha'is get married, they marry themselves before 2 witnesses, and it's legal, and it has to be recorded and so on.
It's interesting. There's a connection there in terms of Episcopal theology about marriage, because like we consider marriage to be a sacrament, but the sacraments of baptism and Eucharist, they require this. Well, Eucharist at least requires the services of a priest. But in marriage, it's the 2 people that are performing the sacrament, and the priest in that sense serves as a witness and a sort of a declarer that covenant has been made. But it's the people that are making the sacrament. So a similar theology there.
Right. And as you bring that up, one of the things you notice as you become a Baha'i as long as I have, which may be hard for you to do since I'm about 50 years, you start going back and seeing the origins of all the Baha'i teachings in other religions in some form or another. As I mentioned the story of Joseph in the well, and there's so many different things that you'll see if you become immersed in this Baha'i faith and start to look back at other religions. You start to go, oh my goodness, I never really paid attention to that before, but it's there.
So is the Baha'i faith, do you consider yourselves an Abrahamic faith?
Well,
considering the connection to, yeah.
Yeah, basically, if you look at our house of worship, it has 9 doors. So among those doors would be the whole tradition of Abraham. But the tradition of Abraham includes, of course, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Are all, but so we're part of, we're part of that tradition, but we're also acknowledging other traditions too. We're coming out of the long Hindu tradition, which includes Krishna, and they adopted Buddha as part of their own. Many Buddhists see themselves as a distinct religion, but that whole tradition. Also, when Jesus was born, the Magi, of course, are Zoroastrian. So that's a different tradition that was acknowledged as connected to Christianity. So Zoroastrians are also part of our tradition. So we see ourselves as connected to all the religious traditions. But in addition to that, as I said, when I talked about going into a sweat lodge and also visiting the Hopi Reservation and attending a rainbow dance, and I also have talked to Aborigines from Australia, I see all the religious traditions. Maybe we've lost the dynamic divine origin of some of these, but if you look at the Lakota, for example, the coming of the peace pipe, the sweat lodge, these are religious traditions that say, oh, my goodness, I wonder if the God was behind that. But if you look at historically, you'll start to see evidence of things that are unifying principles that bring the people that used to be fighting together. There probably was a divine whispering going on there somehow that didn't happen by logic, because people keep fighting when they're being just logical. It seems to require love that transcends experience to bring people together of really different groups. So so we believe that God has always been. He's always been teaching mankind. Will continue to always teach mankind and not leave us to our own clever devices.
Jim, you mentioned that you became Baha'i at the age of 28. What denomination were you associated in the Christian church, and what initiated your moving to the Baha'i faith?
Yeah, I was raised Catholic. I went to Catholic schools for 12 years, from first grade to 12th grade. And then when I got to college, I learned the history of Christianity that hadn't been taught to me. And my faith was shattered like throwing a rock at a glass house. So then I was left with the things I had been taught was true or not. What did I believe? I certainly believed everything Jesus taught, but that left me feeling adrift. I studied with a Jewish rabbi for a long time. I studied Hinduism, Buddhism, and then I just was in limbo for a while until I went to a meeting and someone explained the Baha'i faith, and I said, oh my goodness, that's what I've always believed. And then I had to come to grips with this Baha'u'llah person. Who does he say he is? And so after I came to grips with that, that's when I was 28. I became a believer. In a sense, a believer all over again, because I really believe deeply in the teachings of Jesus through those 12 years. So I never really left that. It was the structure and of Catholic Church that was shattered for me, not my love of Jesus.
I'm wondering, during the pandemic, we found that, we certainly can't wait to get back together in person and be able to worship in person, but we found Zoom and worshiping online to be new tools that we've been able to use. And I wonder about the Baha'i community as well, given that you can be quite dispersed. Have you found, gathering together on Zoom or online as a way of increasing your connections with each other?
Yes. In fact, I went to a meeting over in Santa Rosa the other day, and they said, "Oh my gosh, Jim Haslip is here," because I did activities with him for quite a while, and then I could show up on the Zoom meeting very easily. So we also did children's classes with we've got an interesting family. We had 10 grandchildren, 5 of them were mixed race. So some of them are Baha'is, and so this Baha'i family, my one son and his wife and kids, and another son and wife and kids, one from Vancouver, one from just outside of Cleveland. We all got together, we started doing children's classes. We invited these other friends of ours from Mendocino County to join us. And so Zoom is very interesting that way. It's brought us together in more ways than before. But I do like to be in Ben and Eileen's house and eat their food and see their smiles up close. So I missed that, and I'm looking forward to that again.
Ben and Eileen, is there anything you'd like to share? Any reflections about your experience of the faith?
Well, that, like Jim was saying at the beginning, how much time do you have?
Yeah. We have
But I
10 more
guess,
minutes.
yeah, well, just in a few minutes. I guess it's one thing to say about during the pandemic is that there are local Baha'i communities, like in Napa, we have a grand total of 10 Baha'is, adult Baha'is. And so we do meet on Zoom pretty regularly, as Jim was mentioning, the feasts and holy days and things. But also we're welcome to meet with other people in other communities, but we tend to try to develop it locally first to kind of really get to know each other and work together locally. But when you're in Jim's situation where you're carrying the flag by yourself, you kind of go wherever you need to go to. But just to mention, I come from a Jewish tradition many years ago, not particularly religious, and I had a different spiritual path, but also, at some point finding that the Baha'i Faith really made a whole lot of sense to me. I didn't know there was a global community like this, that everybody believed the same thing. There weren't divisions, and I was awestruck. So once I found out about that, I had to, like Jim was saying, then I had to look at all the hard stuff. Do I really believe in God? Do I really want to be friends with all these people who I don't know? So that continues to this day. So anyway, that's just a few things I would say. Ben.
Mhm.
Well, I just felt Jim did such a great job explaining it. I wish I could really add something. I mean, I really resonated with the overall principle of unity, and the idea that becoming a Baha'i doesn't immediately bring salvation, if you will. It's an ongoing journey. It's an ever-ending journey for your whole life, and so I was attracted to the idea that that it's possible to have this faith without thinking of others as less or wrong in any way. That I did see truth, this idea that truth is good. No, it's like a light is good no matter what lamp it's shining in. And some lamps shine brighter than others, but light is light, and so the idea that you could instantly connect. I found it very interesting, Jim's statement about how he feels like he can be part of their faith, even though they don't maybe think that he's part of it, right? So anyway, it's just this idea of unity is just really beautiful, and how it's manifested in the world, and it's our ongoing task here to bring this divine world and into view. So
Wonderful. Any other questions?
Well, once again, I want to thank you all for including us in this journey of yours to understand how other people are trying to understand God and develop community and become better people. So I'm so impressed with St. Mary's and with Robin and her sister Amy and the efforts to combat racism and foster the equality of women and men. And we feel a great deal of harmony and fellowship and kinship with the efforts of the Episcopal communities throughout Napa.
Wonderful. Well, this has just been so inspiring. It's one thing I've read about the Baha'i Faith, but it's completely different when you actually get to talk to somebody and have them explain what it is that they love about their faith and how it is that it informs their life. And I got to know you a little bit, Jim, through our Sacred Ground Circle, and was just so impressed by your work in racial justice throughout your life. And now it kind of comes together as you're talking about your faith and the way that vision of unity and setting aside bias has been really so helpful. I would think throughout your life in that regard.
Yeah, if you realize that there's so much work to be done, you'll probably say, is there something else I can go to? But you're welcome to join us in any capacity, any way you want to. As I say, Eileen and Ben are going to be doing the Napa community will have a holy day for Nowruz coming up in about 3 weeks. Feel free to join in and see what they're all doing. You'll find them reading prayers and Ordinarily, they'd be passing out the food, but that might be a little hard to do. So anyway, thank you so much for including us.
Wonderful. Yeah,
Jim,
thank you so much for being
Thank you
here.
for doing
Thank
an
you.
excellent job. I worked for over 20 years with and for a Baha'i
Mhm.
and have come to a reasonable understanding of your faith. And I think you did an excellent synopsis.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
And
you.
Ben and Eileen, thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
joining us as well.